what's incredible about that is you don't actually agree with my opinion. I mean, you might well have done, but you didn't say, I agree with what he's saying. You just said...
She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she simply collapsed. As Sharon Osbourne fell to the ground during Ozzy's funeral, the silence was deafening. And then, Piers Morgan broke it, loudly. "This isn't grief," he snapped on live television. "It's performance." His reaction sent shockwaves, but what followed was even worse. Because the world didn't just watch Sharon's heartbreak, they judged it, and some tried to own it. Ozzy Osbourne's funeral was meant to be a private farewell to the Prince of Darkness, a final, intimate moment shared among family and close friends. Instead, it turned into a battlefield of emotions, media commentary, and public outrage. At the center, Sharon Osbourne, widow, mother, manager, and now target. When she collapsed beside Ozzy's casket, it wasn't just her body that gave out. It was a lifetime of pain poured into one breathless moment. But Piers Morgan didn't see heartbreak. He saw headlines. And what he said next exposed something deeper. Not just about him, but about all of us. The Osbourne family had asked for privacy. No cameras, no reporters, just one last quiet goodbye to the man who had, for decades, electrified the world and haunted it with his brilliance. But even in death, Ozzy couldn't escape the spotlight. Dozens of paparazzi stationed outside the chapel in Los Angeles waited hours in the sun. Some stood on ladders, some bribed staff. And when the gates opened for Sharon's blacked-out car, shutters exploded like fireworks. Inside, the atmosphere was reverent. Ozzy's urn, engraved with a bat and a simple "thank you for everything," sat beneath a wall of white lilies. Sharon sat up front with her children, her face unreadable. But when it came time to lay him to rest, something shifted. She stood, walked, then buckled. 1 second she was upright, composed, strong, the ever-controlled matriarch. The next, she was on the ground, clutching her chest, mouthing something only her daughter could hear. "I can't do this." The image went viral within hours. Witnesses say it was the kind of silence that hurts. No screams, no dramatic gestures. Just Sharon folding into herself like something inside her had shattered without warning. Kelly Osbourne immediately rushed to her mother's side, trying to lift her as paramedics were discreetly signaled from just outside the venue. Jack Osbourne stood frozen, eyes glassy. Friends described the moment as the most painful thing to witness, not because she fell, but because she didn't fight it. For decades, Sharon had been the iron wall behind Ozzy's chaos, his anchor during addiction, his voice when he couldn't speak, his spine when he physically couldn't stand. And now, in the moment where she was supposed to let go, her body gave up before she could. There was no script, no cameras invited inside, but one lens caught the exact moment Sharon fell, and within minutes, that still frame was being shared with captions like "Heartbreak in real time" and "Rock Widow breaks down." It should have ended there, but outside the chapel, press were already spinning headlines, and across the Atlantic, one voice was preparing to turn this deeply human moment into something else entirely. Less than 24 hours after the funeral, Piers Morgan opened his primetime show with a smirk and a shot. "I've seen some strange things at celebrity funerals," he began, but Sharon Osbourne collapsing at the exact moment cameras were rolling? Come on! His tone wasn't concerned. It wasn't even skeptical. It was accusing. He labeled the moment an emotional stunt, calling it timed grief, and suggested Sharon had turned a solemn goodbye into a reality TV finale. Within minutes, his monologue was clipped and posted everywhere. To some, it sounded like brutal honesty. To others, it sounded like cruelty dressed as commentary. Morgan's tirade didn't stop there. He went on to question the very nature of celebrity grief. These people live in the spotlight, they thrive on attention, and they know exactly when to collapse to make the front page. What made his outburst especially cutting was its timing. Sharon hadn't spoken publicly since the funeral. She hadn't defended herself, hadn't given an interview, hadn't even issued a quote. She was still grieving. But to Morgan, that was irrelevant. Public figure equals public property. He pointed to her history on reality television, her time on The Talk, her book deals, her openness about family struggles, as if those things somehow invalidated the authenticity of her pain. "She's a media professional," he declared. "She knows what plays well." The backlash was immediate. Fans flooded social media in Sharon's defense. "You don't get to tell a widow how to grieve," one user wrote. Another said, "If your first instinct is to judge someone mourning the love of their life, maybe it's not her who's the problem." Even fellow journalists expressed discomfort. One former ITV colleague tweeted, "Piers knows the power of a moment, and he just used it to trample on a grieving woman." But for Morgan, the moment was working. Ratings spiked, hashtags trended, and just like that, the story of Ozzy's farewell shifted, from sorrow to scandal. For a few days, Sharon Osbourne remained silent. Not a statement, not a tweet, not even a denial. Her absence from the public eye only fueled more speculation. Tabloids painted her as both victim and manipulator. Was she overwhelmed or orchestrating? Then, in a surprise move, her daughter Kelly broke the silence first, with a single, blistering Instagram post. "My mother collapsed burying the love of her life. And instead of compassion, some decided to call her a liar. You should be ashamed." Attached was a photo, one never before seen, from the funeral. It showed Sharon slumped on a bench inside the chapel, head resting against her daughter's shoulder. Her face swollen, eyes closed. No cameras, no audience, just heartbreak. The image shifted public sentiment almost instantly. It wasn't a viral clip. It was grief stripped of performance. And then Sharon spoke. In a brief statement released through her publicist, she wrote, "I did not collapse for the cameras. I collapsed because I could not breathe. I collapsed because the man I built my world around was gone." She continued, "If someone thinks that moment was staged, I envy their life, because they've clearly never loved someone that deeply or lost them so completely." The statement struck a nerve. Media outlets rushed to retract earlier implications. Headlines changed tone. Morning shows invited grief counselors to weigh in. And for the first time, the public began to remember that this wasn't a media story. It was a human one. Jack Osbourne also weighed in during a podcast appearance. "We grew up around cameras. We know what fake looks like." That wasn't fake. That was 40 years of pain crashing down on her shoulders. Even Ozzy's longtime bandmate Tony Iommi tweeted his support. Sharon was Ozzy's armor for decades. If she cracked, even for a moment, she earned that. The family's unified defense painted a clear picture. This wasn't about performance, it was about loss, but for some, the damage was already done. Piers Morgan refused to backtrack. In a follow-up segment, he doubled down. "I don't apologize for questioning what millions were thinking. Grief is real, but so is opportunism." He called Sharon's statement PR spin and challenged the public to ask why cameras were even there in the first place. What he failed to acknowledge, of course, was that the footage wasn't staged by the family. It was leaked by paparazzi who had violated the family's request for privacy. And yet again, the story drifted further from the man being mourned, and deeper into the mudslinging that followed his death. Amidst the media firestorm, one thing became painfully clear. The spotlight had shifted. Instead of honoring Ozzy Osbourne's remarkable life and career, the decades of genre-defining music, the personal demons he'd fought, the family he'd held together. Headlines were dominated by a single frame of video and one man's angry opinion. What should have been a celebration of Ozzy's journey from Birmingham factory worker to the godfather of metal was now reduced to side-by-side panels of Piers Morgan and Sharon Osbourne, their pain and outrage monetized by networks hungry for engagement. The irony? Ozzy had long been misunderstood by the media. His persona, the biting heads off bats, the slurred speech, the profanity, was often louder than the man himself. But those close to him knew a different Ozzy. He was a devoted father, a fiercely loving husband, and someone who lived in near-constant pain from Parkinson's disease, old injuries, and the toll of addiction. In his final years, he had grown quieter, more reflective, even spiritual. Friends say he asked for a modest funeral. No Hollywood spectacle, no red carpet, just family, flowers, and the songs that mattered to him. And yet, the world refused to look away. Instead of listening to "Mama, I'm Coming Home" in silence, people scrolled through outrage threads and conspiracy-laden posts. Instead of remembering the man who once said, "I'm just a guy who got lucky making music," the narrative became about who cried, who collapsed, and who shouted first on TV. It was, in many ways, the final insult, the distortion of a man's final goodbye into a media war. And Sharon? She wasn't fighting back for ratings, she was defending something sacred. In the days that followed, a deeper conversation began to emerge, one that stretched beyond Ozzy, Sharon, or Piers. It was about grief. Who owns it? Who gets to display it? And what happens when mourning goes public in a world where everything is content? Social media became a microcosm of these debates. Some argued that as celebrities, the Osbournes should expect this level of scrutiny. They lived their lives in front of us. Why should death be any different? One user tweeted. But others pushed back. Fame isn't consent. Mourning isn't a performance. Grief counselors and psychologists were brought onto news segments to explain how trauma can manifest physically, how collapse is not uncommon at funerals, especially after prolonged stress, caretaking, and emotional exhaustion. Sharon had been all of those things: caretaker, partner, protector, and now she was a widow in the crosshairs. Experts pointed out the double standard as well. Would a grieving husband have received the same accusations? Would his collapse have been labeled a stunt or a tragedy? These questions struck at something larger: our societal discomfort with female emotion, particularly when it's powerful, raw, and inconvenient. Piers Morgan had tapped into that discomfort, whether consciously or not, and in doing so, he revealed just how fragile our empathy can be, how quickly it turns to suspicion when pain doesn't fit the mold. The discourse also extended into the celebrity world. A-list figures, including Elton John and Pink, subtly voiced support for Sharon, emphasizing the need for compassion in moments of true loss. Even those who had once clashed with the Osbournes acknowledged the moment's gravity. A former tabloid editor admitted on a podcast, "We've pushed people to be open, raw, vulnerable, and then punished them for it. It's a cycle we can't seem to break." The cycle was exactly what Sharon had fallen into. One minute, she was mourning her husband. The next, she was fighting for the right to do so without being accused of manipulation. And Ozzy? His name faded from the trending lists. His life, his legacy, his goodbye, overshadowed by everything he would have hated. Away from the media frenzy, behind the gates of their private estate, the Osbourne family began to rebuild. Quietly, deliberately, and without cameras. Sharon withdrew from the public completely. No interviews, no red carpets, no shows. For a woman who once thrived on hosting panels and navigating live television chaos, the silence was deafening. Friends say she spent most of her days in Ozzy's favorite chair, surrounded by his guitars and old tour memorabilia. She replayed their home videos. She reread old letters. And sometimes she just sat in the quiet, holding one of Ozzy's stage jackets as if it were his hand. She wasn't just grieving a husband, one close friend shared. She was grieving decades of identity. Their entire lives were built together. When he died, a part of her did too. The kids, Kelly, Jack, and Amy, took turns staying with her. They cooked her meals, walked the dogs, held her hand when she didn't speak. Ozzy's youngest granddaughter drew him pictures and taped them to the walls of his music room. His absence was felt in every room, but so was his spirit. It wasn't all sorrow, though. There were moments of laughter, remembering Ozzy's hilarious timing, his obsession with pranking the tour crew, the way he insisted on wearing socks in the pool because it felt like armor. The family even started playing his favorite Sabbath tracks out loud during dinners. Not to cry, but to feel him near. But even inside that bubble of love and memory, the pain of the outside world still seeped in. Sharon, at one point, reportedly deleted all news apps from her phone. She refused to watch any TV shows except nature documentaries. But every so often, something would break through. A cruel comment, a clickbait headline, a reminder that even in death, Ozzy's family couldn't fully escape the spectacle. And yet, they carried on. Not for show, but for survival. Jack eventually returned to his podcast. Kelly began working on a tribute documentary. Amy started writing music again. And Sharon? She started writing letters to Ozzy every night. One of them ended with, "I defended you in life. I'll defend you in death. Always." In a world obsessed with headlines, sometimes we forget the human behind the story. Yes, Sharon Osbourne collapsed. Yes, Piers Morgan reacted. Yes, the media turned mourning into madness. But at the heart of it all was something achingly simple. A woman said goodbye to her husband. Not a rock star, not a reality TV icon. Just her love. The world may debate the moment for years, frame by frame, comment by comment. But what they can't debate is the truth that lingered in Sharon's trembling body as she fell. Grief doesn't ask for permission, and it doesn't wait for privacy. So maybe the real question isn't, was it real? Maybe it's, why do we doubt grief when it doesn't look the way we expect? Ozzy Osbourne gave the world decades of unforgettable music, chaotic brilliance, and undeniable soul. But his final legacy might be something quieter and deeper. A lesson about love. A reminder that even the loudest legends leave behind a silence no one else can fill. If this story moved you, or if you've ever had to defend your own grief, we want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories behind the fame. Because the truth deserves to be heard, even when it hurts.